Hello everybody, my name is Eliseo Fernández and I would like you to imagine that typical Sunday when we are at home with your laptop preparing one activity for our students for the next day, and that moment when you think, yes, this is gonna rock, they are gonna love it. And did it ever happen to you that when you go to your school the next day, that activity doesn't work? Did it happen to you that then you repeat the exact same activity the following day with a different group of students, and now it does work? It doesn't make sense. There must be something, maybe a hidden magical button that we could press to activate the students, and somehow throughout my career I've been trying to find it by creating very engaging activities, but again and again sometimes they worked and sometimes they didn't, until one day when something unexpected happened to me, something that made me see everything from a different perspective. And I'm going to tell you the story that changed everything for me. Well, when I was in Spain, we were implementing a new bilingual model that was pretty much the same thing we have here in the US, but the other way around. We taught English for Spanish speakers. So over there, I was a physical education teacher in English. And as you might imagine, receiving instruction in one language that is not yours is not an easy thing. So at that time, that model was reserved only for some students. So we have two different profiles at our school. We had the bilingual students that I usually taught, usually with the best grades, that spoke in English. And then we had the regular students that I never taught, that were more challenging, let's say, that received instruction in Spanish. Those students came from disadvantaged backgrounds and their families had problems with drugs, unemployment, and so on. So you might imagine for those kids, learning a language from a country they would never visit probably was the last of their priorities. I remember in my school, my middle school, that student, Paco Amador. Paco was one in a lifetime student. He had everything you desire as a teacher. He was uncompliant, defiant, non-cooperative. I mean, you don't know what I'm talking about. And he wasn't even my student, but everybody knew him at the school. He was a celebrity. Well, one day I was at the hallway at the school and I saw Paco over there one more time skipping some of the teacher's lesson. And I could take him to the principal's office, but that couldn't work. So as I was desperate, I came with this genius idea and I said, okay, Paco, do you want to join my class? I invite you. And the minute I said that, I totally regretted it because he didn't speak any English at all and he was going to spoil my wonderful class. But those words were already out of my mouth and I had to stick to it. So I went to talk to the math teacher with whom Paco was supposed to be, and she couldn't be any happy. Like, okay, you want to have Paco? I met her day. He came to my class. That day we had technical skills of soccer. And as usual, I spoke everything all the time in English, though I used some body language to reinforce what I said, like a little bit faster, kick the ball, stretch your triceps, just to help him because he didn't speak any English at all. And to my surprise, Paco did just like everybody else in the class. So when the lesson was over, I went to talk to him and I said, okay, Paco, what do you think about this lesson in English? And he said, well, English, I don't really speak it, but I understand it all and I like it. What? Him, Paco, the most challenging student ever, I mean, the most challenging student ever, just told me he loved learning languages. Communicating in one language that is not yours is probably one of the biggest achievements you might have in your life. And Paco just told me he loved that. That made me realize the potential of using in your class something that already motivates your students. And I wanted to know more about that. But the problem was that there was not enough research at that time. So 2 years later, I found myself conducting one study with 3,355 Spanish speakers that did physical education in English. For me, the goal of that research was to find a scientific explanation for that personal anecdote, so everybody could benefit from that, and not just me. The point is that when that study was over, one of the biggest achievements, one of the biggest findings of that research was that intrinsic motivation that those 3,003 something studies had to physical education could transfer into learning languages just because the two things happen at the same time, just like with Paco. And that was the motivational transcontextualization. We all have a Paco in our class. That student to whom we want to teach something, but they are motivated, they are intrinsically motivated about something else. And if you think twice, somehow all of our students are a little bit like Paco. We want them to learn something, but they are thinking about Leo Messi, football, soccer, Taylor Swift, video games, whatever. So if you can't fight them, join them. If just make the most of that, okay? So how can we take advantage of that transcontextualization? Okay, the first thing we need to know about transcontextualization is that we need to understand what is that intrinsic motivation and why it's so good. Okay, so we're going to do one activity all together here. In a second, I will ask you to close your eyes and visualize, not yet, wait, visualize two different situations, okay? And then I will ask you a question. Okay, off we go. First, close your eyes, and I want you to imagine yourself at home, relaxing, with a lot of free time, nothing to do. Okay, in that scenario, what would you do just for the pleasure of doing it? I want you to think of that, and I want you to imagine yourself doing that. Okay, open your eyes. Okay, I don't know what you were thinking because I can't read minds, but maybe over there, reading a book, maybe playing an instrument, maybe using your phone, social media, it's okay, everything is okay. So now we go with the second. Close your eyes again, but now I want you to think about something that you hate, but you must do because it's an obligation. Open your eyes. Well, the force that drove us into the first situation, the one we loved, was the intrinsic motivation. And the one that led us to the second one, the one we hated, was the extrinsic motivation. The interesting thing here is that there is consensus in literature that intrinsic motivation brings much better outcomes, like more persistence when we are doing tasks, more deeper learning, more autonomy, and not to mention the satisfaction of doing what you really want to do, like when you had your eyes closed at the beginning. So we all agree that all those are very good ingredients for the learning process. So how can we benefit from that? Well, imagine for a second that we could manipulate our motivation. That is to decide when to feel that intrinsic motivation that is so good. Imagine that, for example, we could do the activity that we hated, the one you thought, with the same satisfaction as, for example, reading a book, playing a guitar, or using your phone. And imagine that superpower as a teacher. It could be awesome, like, oh yes, let's go to the PLC. Or who wants to be in charge of those angry parents at the dismissal? Oh, angry parents at the dismissal, my two favorite things, I volunteer. Or I don't know why, but today I woke up and I feel like documented every single intervention because I love paperwork. That would be awesome. But the point of this speech is not to find that magical button in the teachers, but to do it in the students. So how can we get that intrinsic motivation and get it and put it into the student? Well, most of the teachers would say, yes, let's create wonderful activities, let's do gamification, whatever. I mean, that's good. But if you think about that, usually when you want to get something fast, the best way to do it is by stealing it. So why don't we steal that intrinsic motivation from wherever they have it and transport it to where we need it? And that is essentially the idea of the transcontextualization. But to make it work, first we need to understand that in our life we have different domains. You actually identified two of them when you had your eyes closed, and as you saw, your attitude might be very different from one to the other. And the point is that those domains are not isolated. Sometimes a big one includes some others, like the school includes different subjects, and sometimes two of them overlap. The amazing thing is that when that happens, when two domains in your life overlap, the intrinsic motivation can flow from one to the other, just like with Paco. Just like with Paco. So take playing the guitar, take music, take instruments, take video games, take whatever motivates your students, and make your class spin around that. If you want to teach your Paco or your students, the first thing you need to do is being in his shoes. So when I go back and trying to think about my career, that moment when I was trying to find that magical button, probably I was wrong from the beginning. It's not about creating wonderful activities or that PowerPoint presentation with slides that is going to work for the whole class or the whole district. It's about discovering what motivates each of our students and combine it with what we are actually teaching so the motivation can flow to that point. You, as a teacher, might do the best activity ever. But if your students don't want to learn because they are not motivated, it won't work, period. And sometimes I've seen some kids that they like soccer and they would enjoy the most simple activity ever just because you're using a ball in that game. So maybe it's not about you as a teacher. It's not about those strategies or activity. Maybe it's all about the student and what motivates them. There is not a magical button for all of the students, but there is a magical button in each one of them. And to find it, you just have to talk to them. You just have to know them. Anybody can come to your class and give you great advice, but nobody but you is going to know your students. So you, better than anybody else, is going to know what is good for them. And is going to know where is that key to activate your student, making the intrinsic motivation flow and turning your class into a success. So, just to conclude, as we are here in Houston, the medical capital of the world, sometimes I wonder, honestly I wonder, just like with those modern therapies that are customized based on every patient, why can't we do the same thing with education? Why can't we customize education? And not only by having different tiers, but by combining what we want to teach with what each of the students want to learn. And that is the magical button. Thank you.